Jane Goodall, the woman who defined man. Jane Goodall, born Valerie Jane Morris Goodall, was born in London, England on April 3, 1943, to her father, Mortimer Morris Goodall, an engineer, and her mother, Vanna Morris Goodall, a successful novelist. When Jane was around 2, her father gave her a toy stuffed chimpanzee in honor of a baby chimp born at the London Zoo. Friends warned her parents that such a gift will cause nightmares for a child her age. However, Jane loves the toy and names the chimpanzee Jubilee, carrying it with her wherever she goes. More than 70 years later, Jubilee, now completely bald, sits on her dresser in England. According to Jane, apart from Jubilee, she has been fascinated by live animals from the time she first learned to crawl. In the fall of 1935, Jane hid in a hen house for about 5 hours to see how a hen laid an egg. The entire house had been looking for Jane as she sat quietly watching the hen. Her mother even rang the police to report her missing. When Jane emerged from the house and her mother saw how excited she was, all her mother could do was sit down and listen to Jane tell the wonderful story of how a hen lays an egg. She could not even scold her. Growing up, Jane had a dog named Rusty. Rusty taught Jane that animals have minds, personalities, and emotions. These interactions with animals would just be the beginning of her exploration into the animal kingdom. The Christmas of 1942, she received a book called The Story of Dr. Dolittle by Hugh Laughlin as a gift. The book is about a doctor who can talk to animals and who travels to Africa. This sparked Jane's interest in animals even more. It became her dream to live in Africa and learn more about the animals there. An avid reader, Jane read everything she could get her hands on about the wild animals in Africa. For a girl her age, in the time period she was in, her dream was far-fetched from what the other girls' dreams were. Nonetheless, her mother supported Jane's dreams and told her, "If you really want something, and if you work hard, take advantage of the opportunities, and never give up, you will somehow find a way." Jane's childhood was filled with happiness, spending much of her time outdoors exploring. She loved to climb trees and sit in them to read books. These traits would be useful later on in her life, helping her enjoy the solitude that would be a major part of her life's work. She recalls that while in trees daydreaming and reading, she would imagine herself as an adult traveling the world and working with animals, a daydream that eventually came true for her. World War II would split her family apart. Her father was sent to war, disappearing from her life for a time. During this time, Jane, her mother, and sister moved in with her grandmother and aunts, where they remained when her father and mother divorced after the war. When Jane graduated from high school in 1952, her mother could not afford to send her to college, so she learned how to be a secretary and worked for a time at the Oxford University typing documents, and soon changed careers to work with filmmakers, choosing music for their documentaries. In May of 1956, Jane received an invitation that would make her dreams come true. A friend, Chloe Mang, invited her to visit her family's farm in Kenya. Jane promptly quit her job and moved back home to wait tables to earn the fare she needed to get to Africa and back. At the age of 23, her dream was starting to become a reality. In 1957, Jane has the most important event of her visit by meeting famous anthropologist and paleontologist Dr. Louis S. B. Leakey. Impressed by Jane's knowledge of the Africa and its wildlife, Leakey hires Jane as his assistant. Jane would travel with Louis and his wife, Mary, to the gorge to dig for fossils. Jane, once in an interview, reminisces about her time at the gorge and says, "I could have learned a whole lot more about fossils and become a paleontologist, but my childhood dream was as strong as ever. Somehow I must find a way to watch free, wild animals living in their own undisturbed lives. I want to learn things that no one else knows, uncover secrets through patient observation. I want to come as close to talking to animals as I can." Leakey, a leading authority on the evolution of man, knew that there was a lack of data concerning the behavior of chimpanzees in the wild. He had been looking for someone to go to Tanzania and study the chimpanzees there. His theory was it might give clues about human evolution. Leakey felt although Jane had no scientific training nor a college degree, she had ambition. Therefore, she was the one that was fit for the job. However, her dreams were almost crushed when the British colonial authorities refused to allow her to travel alone to the chimpanzee reserve near Lake Tanganyika. The authorities and other experienced professionals did not believe a young woman from England could survive the African bush alone. Therefore, Jane's mother stepped up and volunteered to go with her daughter to the Gumbi Stream Chimpanzee Reserve in western Tanzania in 1960 for the first 3 months, so her daughter could follow her dreams. The first few weeks were a culture shock to Jane and her mother. With a makeshift tent made out of poles and straws for a roof, they could hear leopards calling at night, buffalo running through the jungle, saw deadly cobras, and both become ill from malaria with no medication to comfort them. Thankfully, they would recover and adapt to the jungle. With patience and determination, Jane searched the jungle every day, deliberately trying not to get too close to the chimpanzees too soon. She would find them and sit day after day, waiting for the chimps to see her and gradually become used to her presence among them. Jane would gradually win the trust of a single male chimp she named David Greybeard. His acceptance opened the doors from the other chimpanzees to accept her as well. From this chimp, one of her most important discoveries came. While observing David, she noticed he was stripping the leaves from sticks to use them for collecting and eating termites. Although animals had been observed in the past using objects as tools, it was the first instance an animal being observed altering an object for practical purposes. In other words, tool-making, an activity previously thought to be the defining characteristics of human beings. He would also use leaves to collect rainwater. Furthermore, while observing, she noticed that the chimps used nonverbal behaviors to show their emotions by patting each other's backs, holding hands, and even grudges if one was offended. On hearing Jane's observation, Leakey famously said, "Now we must redefine tool, redefine man, or accept chimpanzees as humans." Her first year in the jungle, Jane also observed chimps hunting and eating bush pigs and other small animals. This would be another important discovery because scientists thought that chimpanzees were primarily vegetarians. After these discoveries, National Geographic would sponsor Jane's work and send a photographer, Hugo van Lawick, whom she would marry and divorce 10 years later, and also have a son named Grub with. To document Jane's life in the bush, National Geographic would push Jane's work into fame. However, she was not taken serious enough by scientists because she was not a doctor. Leakey convinced Cambridge to allow her into their program, but some scholars and scientists at the university would give her cold reception. She would be criticized for her unorthodox method by giving the chimpanzees names instead of numbers. It was believed that the numbering system prevented researchers from investing the animals with human emotions. Goodall believed that understanding animal behavior requires the observer to see the animals as individuals. In fact, she found the chimps in her study group to have different personalities and complex family relations. She was having to defend an idea that chimpanzees have emotions, minds, and personalities. An interesting fact is that Jane suffered from a neurological condition. This condition involved her not to be able to recognize people's faces. Yet, she had no difficulty in deciphering the faces of the chimps that she has tracked and could recall their names. Once she received her PhD in ethnology, the science of animal behaviors, Jane would continue her dream of following the wildlife in Africa for decades. National Geographic would grant funds for the first permanent structure to exist in Gombe, which was an aluminum building which would allow for the beginnings of the research center. Through her observation, Jane would uncover many aspects of chimpanzee behavior and will show that they are more like humans than anyone ever suspected. She studied the stages of chimpanzee development and found similarities between it and human development. Just as human children, some will develop faster than others, and the mother has a marked effect on the development. Mother chimps can be permissive or restrictive, just as human mothers are. Jane observed facial expressions and calls of the chimps. She also observed them using objects in their environment for aimed throwing, investigation probes, weapons, feeding on ants and termites, tool making, sponges, toilet paper, and among many other. She found chimpanzees to be omnivores just like humans. More dominant females sometimes killed the young of other females in effort to maintain their dominance. Jane would also see a dark side of the chimpanzee life that included a 4-year war between two bands of chimps, marked by extreme savagery and acts of cannibalism. The war ended when the last surviving chimp of one tribe was dead. She watched one chimp named Fegan kidnap an infant chimp just to get the rest of the group to follow him to another location. Through her observations, Jane discovered many similarities between humans and chimps, but also differences. Humans have a higher intellect than chimps and can ask what is their life's purpose. Chimps are only directed by instinct. They can be taught sign language but do not understand the past and the future meanings. Humans evolved physically from an ape man and culturally continue to evolve. There needs to always be a moral development that make humans more compassionate and less aggressive. She says that what humans evolve from is not nearly as critical as the direction that the world is going. There is an interdependence between man and everything in nature, and that must be respected. Jane has also received many honors throughout her career, including the Medal of Tanzania, the National Geographic Society's Hubbard Medal, the Coyote Prize of Japan, the Prince of Austria's Award for Technical and Scientific Research, the Benjamin Franklin Medal in Life Science, and the Gandhi King Award for Nonviolence. In 2002, the United Nations named her a Messenger of Peace. In a 2004 ceremony at Buckingham Palace, Queen Elizabeth II conferred on Dr. Goodall the title of Dame of the British Empire, equivalent to a knighthood. She has also founded the Jane Goodall Institute for Wildlife Research, Education, and Conservation. The institute initially focused on wild chimpanzees, and its work expanded to promoting the power of individuals to protect the environment for all living things. Also, a global environmental and humanitarian education program for youths called Roots and Shoots, a youth program that is now in over 100 countries. She has also founded TACARE, the Lake Tanganyika Catchment Reforestation and Education Program that works with local communities to improve their lives while also strengthening conservation. Goodall has been an outspoken opponent on the use of chimpanzees in the medical research and has campaigned for the more humane treatment of research animals when their use cannot be done with altogether. Other dangers to chimps include the erosions of their natural habitat through careless development and the hunting of the wild chimpanzees for their luxury bushmeat. Her fight to preserve the world's chimpanzees population has included service on the board of the world's largest chimpanzee sanctuary, Save the Chimps, in Fort Pierce, Florida. She has published many books for adults and children, some of them titled Seeds of Hope, Through a Window, Dr. White, In the Shadow of Man, My Life with the Chimpanzees, Me, Jane, along with countless other books. She serves as the National Geographic Explorer in Residence and the President of Advocates for Animals. She now lectures around the world 300 days out of the year in packed auditoriums and school gymnasiums about the threat facing chimpanzees, other environmental crises, and her reason for hope that we will ultimately solve the problems we have imposed on this earth. Jane Goodall is truly the woman who defined man. Her perception of primates, people, and the connection between the two has changed the worldview of chimpanzees and humans. Her extensive research into the behavior of chimpanzees, which started in Africa in the 1960s and continues today, fundamentally altered scientific thinking about the relationship between humans and other mammals.